Welcome back to Colonial Outcast, the anti-war, anti-imperialist podcast that would really piss off your try that in a small town uncle. The world is insane right now, and if you haven't been paying attention, it's not going to get any better, like anytime soon. But we're all in it together, and if you check us out on Patreon, we do exclusive content, including a gallows humor episode Fridays, 3 to 4 times a month, in order to not go insane. So link in the description if you're interested in our Patreon. If not, and you feel like you're being nickeled and dimed by late stage finance capitalism, just like, sharing, subscribe, commenting. It helps to drive the video through the algorithm and push us out there. So anyways, my name is Greg Stoker, and for the purposes of this episode, I'll introduce myself as a former U.S. Army Ranger, Afghanistan, unfortunately, and currently a geopolitical analyst at Mint Press News, because today we are focusing on Lebanon with a more military-oriented episode, wherein we will discuss leaked U.S. intelligence documents about Israel's impending attack on Iran, Israel's targeting of banks in Lebanon, their preparations to start bombing hospitals, sectarian tensions rising in Beirut, and morale problems in the IDF, the Israeli dumbass force. That's another alternative title we've come up with. So as Israel expands the dimensions of its self-destructive forever war, we are joined again by regular contributor Matthew Enderline, former U.S. Army infantry officer, also Afghanistan, who is currently living in Beirut and is currently watching the bombs fall while getting another university degree. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be back, Greg.
So, real quick, with my, I'm going to send a monologue real quick. Strap in, y'all. We're just going to jump right in, starting with the leaked U.S. intelligence documents before zeroing in on southern Lebanon. We have to touch on it. There's an impending Israeli attack on Iran that's going to really heighten tensions yet again. So, on Thursday, this past Thursday, it's currently October 2nd, 22nd. Is it Tuesday? I don't even know what day it is anymore. It's leg day for me. Beyond that,
Tuesday.
I'm not really sure. Yeah. So it's Thursday, currently leg day. The two U.S. intelligence documents detailing Israel's apparent preparations for a retaliatory attack on Iran leaked on a Telegram channel called Middle East Spectator, which, I follow. As is routine in such cases, the news was initially met with a lot of skepticism by the media and the disclaimer that we cannot confirm the authenticity and veracity of these documents. That was the official government line. But on Sunday, the Pentagon confirmed that the documents attributed to two U.S. Intelligence agencies, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which has a lot of satellites and aerial monitoring equipment, and the National Security Agency, NSA, were real. The documents were real. It announced its concern that it was conducting an investigation into the origins of the leak, adding that damage to national security appears to be limited. Yeah, because it was limited because the documents are about Israel, not about the United States. And so this leak of documents on the eve of a planned Israeli attack on Iran can kind of like give us some insight into the present state of relations between Washington and Jerusalem. Not much, but a little bit. It's hard to believe, honestly, that the leak is a result of a decision by the Biden administration to kind of subvert Netanyahu by leaking his plan of attack to open source that could be accessed by Iranian intelligence. I don't think Biden would do that. In such a case, the material would probably have reached the New York Times first if it was coming from an official White House leak and not a Telegram channel of pro-Iranian sympathizers. And it wouldn't have included pictures of the secret documents either. When the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, leaked in December that Israel was dropping almost 50% of dumb bombs, unguided munitions, they didn't actually leak the documents themselves. So, yeah, there's a whole politics to leaked documents that I talked about on a previous episode on Mint Press News, but it's pretty interesting. I do think, and I'd like to hear your opinion, that the very publication of the documents at this sensitive time kind of maybe testifies to American discomfort, which is different from willingness to make it stop. American discomfort with Israel's actions. Someone in the chain dealing with it could even be a junior intelligence officer who sympathizes with the Palestinians, was angry enough to take the risk and distribute the secret information. And the Pentagon's announcement, I think, of an investigation of the leak may send a message that the Biden administration sees it as a serious incident, but at the same time, it confirms that the information in the document is authentic and reliable. It doesn't, yeah. I mean, I don't think it like really changes much. I don't think it's indicative that Washington is getting fed up or is going to stop Israel. It just, if it was an official leak, which it doesn't look like to me, because again, the Times or the Washington Post didn't get it first. It seems like conscientious objector stuff.
Yeah. I think you're spot on, and I agree. It does not look like a leak that was intentional, for all the reasons you just described. And so the real impact of this leak is not really the information that's inside it, because the idea that Israel is preparing to strike Iran is not really that newsworthy. We already knew that was happening. It just confirms some of the details of the plan, with the exception of it does seem that this is maybe the first time through official channels that there's any acknowledgement that Israel does in fact have nuclear weapons, which hasn't really been officially acknowledged.
No, that
anywhere.
was significant.
But it's a well-known secret. Again, it's something everyone already knows. But I think the real impact here. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Tell me the real impact. I'm going to pull up the document real quick.
The real impact is just like you said, is that someone thought that this was worthy enough to risk prison time, risk their career and their reputation to leak. And I think it's an indicator of something that is a very well-known secret, that there are large numbers of people working within the realm of foreign policy, within intelligence, and within security affairs, that are seeing the writing on the wall and recognize that the United States is supporting actively a genocide and numerous other war crimes throughout the Middle East. People are seeing that. We've known that because we've seen a bunch of people resigning and speaking out against it. People like you and me who are out, but there's a lot of people who think like us, who are working in these environments. And of course, it's a huge risk for them to say anything or speak or do anything about it. So the fact that this is happening is just an indicator of something we already know is there.
Yeah, and just so for the audience, just to give you a taste of what's in the documents, we're looking at headline: Israeli Defense Forces continue key munitions prep and covert UAV activity. UAV is unmanned aerial vehicles, so drones, other sensor aircraft, almost certainly for a strike on Iran. This is from 16th of October. The Israeli Defense Forces continued key munitions prep. We cannot definitively predict the scale and scope of a strike on Iran, and such a strike can occur with no further geo-int warning. So geographical intelligence warning, like satellite imagery, other aerospatial monitoring of key air assets. So if we look at this, it's a checklist. It seems like in terms of preparation for the assault, we've got weapons handling, check, long range ballistic missiles handling, a different munitions handling, so medium, low. We've got air defense. They've resupplied their interceptors. They've elevated missile and air defenses. Ground forces, change in IDF posture related to Iranian proxies in northern Israel. Not really much of a naval dispersal. Air power, yes, they've conducted covert UAV flight operations over Iran, looking for target data. They combat search and rescue preparations, no, because I don't think they're going to send any like manned vehicles over there. aircraft defensive dispersal. Yeah, I don't really know much about that. No assessment for nuclear, and yeah, so no nuclear forces on alert. So this is how we know that the U.S. knows that they officially have nukes, because it's within the threat, the assessment matrix. And special forces, there it doesn't seem like there are any special forces preparation for external operations. Now, yeah, and so that's just a sample of like one of the documents. It was apparently a large leak. I haven't had time to go through it. And were they leaked on purpose? Possibly, yes, by someone who wanted to derail Israel's plan. It's also possible Iran does have a large and sophisticated cyber warfare capability, so the possibility of a hostile attack is also being investigated, but I don't know much about that.
It's a pretty like run of the mill like daily document. It's not a huge.
Yeah.
Seems like a significant effort to do a cyber attack to steal, one in sum from one day. It doesn't seem feasible.
Yeah, well, it also shows that Israel is deeply untrustworthy, and Washington still spies on our quote greatest ally in the region in case it's not being given they're not giving us the full picture, because obviously, I mean yeah.
Well,
But
there's not a DoD representative who's stayed in Tel Aviv who hasn't had their room bugged by Israeli intelligence. So that's the normal way of doing business.
Did when you were in the Army, did you ever go through the foreign area officer course?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Because a couple of my acquaintances have, and like when you go through the foreign area officer course, it's basically you're training to be like a liaison officer with a different country. I mean, it's kind of reductive, but that's what you're doing, and you learn like which countries spy on U.S. military and intelligence personnel the most, and it's not Russia, it's not China, it's literally Israel. So
no, I've heard insane stories from friends who have worked there on the lengths they've taken to try to gather information on them, to collect on them. It's crazy.
So, anyways, these plans show the Israeli Air Force is going to carry out some kind of long range retaliation and maybe start a distance conflict with Iran. And they're well advanced, and that mitigation is being put in place against an expected Iranian response. More on that when it actually happens. In short, if and when Israel does carry out these plans, then the Middle East will once again experience a period of extreme tension, as if it's already not. Okay, so that's still a wait and see. That's in a holding pattern, proverbial holding pattern right now. So now moving on to Lebanon. Matt, you're in Beirut. Real quick, I just woke up, and the first thing I saw on Telegram and social media was this horrifying sight. Hang on, we're going to rewind it. Basically, it's a significant GBU guided bomb unit collapsing an entire tenement apartment building. Chances of survival if you're inside, not good at all. Pretty much nil.
Yeah.
So,
and that occurred in an area that is not quite central Beirut, but closer, an area that has not been as significantly bombed as some of the other areas of the southern suburbs. So it was kind of one of these surprise attacks, which of course have been increasing, and the scope of them has been increasing over the past few weeks. But with that one, I believe they issued a warning for that one 10 or 15 minutes before it happened, and it's expected that attack was in response to a public relations or media representative from Hezbollah doing an interview in the area, not even in the same building.
That's a great point. Hezbollah has a government function as well, and so therefore, a lot of people in Hezbollah are civilians and non-combatants.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Hezbollah is a significant part of the Lebanese infrastructure and civil society here. I mean, they have a plurality in the Lebanese parliament, and Lebanon basically is a state where the government functions are run only at the local or kind of like a privatized level. So, for example, my electricity doesn't come from the government. I get maybe 1 or 2 hours of power a day from the government. So I have a generator operator. Every neighborhood has one that you pay to provide your electricity. So things like that, the trash collection, are all kind of like decentralized. So in essence, Hezbollah in the areas that it operates in, that it controls and has its support, it's providing all of the major civil services that any government would. And it does have financial institutions that have been bombed this week, that worked to give loans out to people during times of economic crisis. Yeah, so it's a very deeply integrated part of the civil society, and it is a political party in the government.
And so, I mean, we already know this. I just have to ask rhetorically. It seems like anyone in Hezbollah is being targeted, civilian
Yes,
or otherwise.
at this point, yes. And what we've seen since the last time we've talked, we've seen the very obvious like unfolding of this story. The last time we talked, they were in name, attacking the weapons caches and like the military infrastructure of Hezbollah. Of
Mhm.
course, in reality, even several weeks ago when we were talking about, maybe 10 to 25%, this is just my estimation based on every video and incident I've seen and watched, were actually, against some sort of military infrastructure or weapons or ammunition storage. And the rest were just mixed in with a random mix of civilian targets in areas where they have the most support. In the last several weeks, we've seen that go from that to beginning to attack the other parts of kind of the civil infrastructure. So they've been attacking paramedics, and civil service people who are working tirelessly and in dangerous conditions to recover bodies, both dead and alive, from these attacks. I think the day or two after we spoke last time, they started issuing warnings to the Lebanese civil service, and then they started attacking them directly when they would go to do recovery in these areas. And we've seen that expand to the Lebanese Red Cross. And then over the last several weeks, we've seen the targets expand to include just political members of Hezbollah, and the assassination attempts often killed dozens of people, and failed to meet their target, who is just simply a member of parliament from the Hezbollah political party, who is not affiliated with military operations. And now, in the past few days, we're at the point where they've blatantly and announced, and as their stated strategy, to attack financial institutions and any business entity that's associated with Hezbollah. So in the last week, they've been bombing coffee shops and banks and restaurants and people's apartments, and then in also they're continuing to just destroy the southern suburbs as much as they possibly can on a daily basis.
So do you think the targeting of banks is also has the secondary effect of exacerbating the dire economic situation in Beirut and Lebanon in general?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I actually banks in Lebanon are a very almost a dirty word. There's since the financial crisis and the economic crisis started in 2019. People don't trust banks. The banks are essentially a failed institution. I'm not sure that was the case with the Hezbollah affiliated banks. The only thing I really know about them is that they gave out about, I think $500 million to $1 billion in short-term loans to people during that economic crisis, and in the first couple of years after it. I'm sure it will have some effect. I don't know how large, but certainly what they're trying to do is they're trying to sever the Israelis, that is, they're trying to sever the civil, political and economic connection of Hezbollah to Lebanese society and the government. So, I don't know that they can do that, but that's certainly part of their plan as they're now moving beyond just attacking or just pretending to attack military targets.
I think that pretending is the operative word, and so we talked about banks, restaurants, coffee shops, civilian apartment buildings, and now we are seeing echoes of what happened, the propaganda that happened in Gaza with the state policy of directly targeting and bombing hospitals by first doing a propaganda push to manufacture consent for it. So if you're just listening to the audio, I'm bringing up a propaganda, an IDF propaganda page on Twitter, now called X. Thanks, Elon. Okay, so this is Israel War Room. And it says, the IDF reveals Hezbollah constructed massive bunker under Beirut hospital where the group is currently hoarding a cache. Currently hoarding cash. First of all, they're spelling cash as in money instead of cash, CACHE, which is a weapons like depot essentially.
No, they are alleging that they are holding cash as in money.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was their claims, that they're holding billions of dollars in gold bullion. It's
oh my god, like this is a Hezbollah Spanish galleon. It's a Hezbollah Spanish galleon.
Yeah, the IDF is trying to turn this this massacre into the plot for Goldfinger.
Yeah. Okay. Because it says it has a bunch of like bunker schematics under what is it? Al Sahel Hospital. This bunker below the Al Sahel Hospital in Beirut was used for many years by the former leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, as his emergency bunker. The bunker currently serves as Hezbollah's central financial facility, where Hezbollah stores the majority of its money that was stolen from Lebanese civilians and is used for its terrorist activities. I mean, I was under the impression that Hezbollah got most of its money from Iran and like selling drugs and weapons and washing it through the Congo, like just like everyone does.
Yeah, it's a pretty classic portfolio move, right?
Okay, so this reminds me of the first time they bombed Al-Shifa Hospital. They had that horrible CGI graphic of Hamas fighters walking through tunnels that weren't even connected with each other or had doors. There was like a free-floating, disembodied underground office that I guess you would teleport into. And then it turned out to not exist at all. I assume that it's well known that their bunkers don't exist under this hospital.
Well, I mean, how many times are we going to have to talk about videos with like graphic artists making artistic interpretations / propaganda to sell their narrative? Yeah, we've seen it. The same thing a year ago with the Shifa Hospital. We saw it at the beginning of the invasion where they were showing the the rockets and missiles like cleverly disguised inside every Lebanese home in the south. Most of which, actually all of which, I looked at all of those. I did not see one that was directly corroborated with a fact. All of these little animations are their representations of ideas. They're not, just because they make a graphic does not mean that this exists. It's.
Yeah, and a lot of their apologists will say like, look, every time they drop a house in southern Lebanon, there's a secondary explosion. It's like, yeah, don't they cook with propane tanks?
Well, that's blatantly also not true. I mean, I've looked at almost every video of every strike in Lebanon since this has started, and I've seen a hell of a lot of them myself with my very own eyes in Beirut. And I can tell you that out of all of them, I would say around 10%, maybe 15% have secondary explosions. And what they do is they're counting on people, having very little interest in this and just accepting what they are fed, on the news without any effort. Because when you take a look at the primary sources for this, it's very clear that they're mixing in targets with secondary explosions that are clearly, weapons and ammunition caches, with just strikes on civilian infrastructure, people, buildings. It's the evidence is not there to support that.
And I think some of they're demolishing like entire villages and hamlets. I think like some of the worst footage I've seen was like just coming out today. This is coming from TMJ News Network, a very small independent newsroom. They're republishing it. So Israeli army demolishes several buildings in the town of Marbaka, South Lebanon, and they take out an entire block just like they were doing in Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're just listening to the audio, the demolition is extensive, and it's nothing we haven't seen before over the past year. But now it's happening in southern Lebanon. So before we go to military, so I was hoping before we go to military actions and talk about the demolitions and how far they're in to the border, I was hoping we could talk about like sectarian tensions and people being scared of taking in refugees because they don't want their apartments blown up. Like, what exactly is happening there on the ground right now? And I know you don't want to go.
Well, as you
don't want to go into like in depth about like sectarian politics and stuff because that's a whole rabbit hole that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But I was hoping you can give us an idea.
Yeah, sure. As you know, there's we don't know how many it is now. I haven't seen an updated number since 1.2 million displaced people, and that figure was from at least 3 weeks ago. So there's at least 1 million, probably much more displaced people who have been displaced from the south, as well as several areas in Beirut. And of course, that number is increasing every day as the IDF announces wider evacuation orders. And the Lebanese government has announced, from the beginning, announced a bunch of schools to serve as shelters, but it's just really inadequate. There's a lot of people who don't have shelter, who are struggling to find a place to safely stay when they're displaced. And what you see is the neighborhoods that are traditionally Muslim within Lebanon and within Beirut at least are absorbing a large number of these displaced people. And of course, that situation is not even perfect. Yesterday in Hamra, which is the neighborhood with the American University of Beirut, the Lebanese army evicted an entire hotel that was full of displaced people, assuming that they were paying customers also. Like a 5-6 story hotel filled with people that were just sent onto the streets. And frankly, you're just seeing the traditionally Christian neighborhoods in Beirut are not pulling their weight in terms of housing displaced people. And there's a lot of sectarian history that plays into that.
Right. And so what was the official reason for evicting the hotel?
I don't know. I didn't see it. I assume because it was not designated as an official shelter. The official shelters are mostly in schools, which are mostly in Muslim-dominated areas. The Christian areas started opening up schools for shelters when they started receiving money. And of course, if you are not Lebanese, meaning you are a refugee from Syria, or you're a Palestinian, you cannot access the government, designated, shelter facilities, because by law they can only accept people of Lebanese nationality. So it's insane. You've got a lot of people who are being left behind, and frankly, you've got a lot of, in a neighborhood like mine, you just have a lot of apartments that are empty, and people willing to pay to rent them, but they're just not getting access to them. It's
because the fear that they might be targeted and they might drop the entire apartment building or something like that.
I think it goes deeper than that, but yeah, that could be one. I talked to my landlord, who has an empty apartment in this building, and he said he wouldn't rent it to anyone except a foreigner. You have a lot of that mentality here. It's really unfortunate that in this time of intense crisis, that there are people being left behind and being left out in the streets, who really, when there's no reason for it. There's enough space and there's enough resources to take care of those people.
Well, it seems like the forever war is not going to stop. The bombings will continue, and the humanitarian crisis will continue to get worse.
Yeah, it looks that way.
So we'll put a pin in that. Now let's shift to like the military aspects. What's the word on the ground about what's happening in the South?
Yeah, so well, since we've last talked, not a lot of movement on the ground. I mean, after what are we now? 3 or 4? How many weeks are we in since they've invaded? And they are still operating within 3 kilometers of the border, of the border with, Lebanese-Israeli border. So it's kind of insane. There's a lot of activity in those areas, but the IDF does not really have. I mean, they've got footholds in several villages around the areas where they've invaded along the border, but they have not moved further in, and they're eating a lot of casualties daily. You're seeing a lot of mass cal events, and on top of that, which we can go in depth more after this, they're increasing the destruction, and really the complete destruction of these villages to create space for them.
Right, and according to Hezbollah's operations room, this is being reposted by the Cradle media. Said on October 18th that 55 Israeli soldiers were killed in action and over 500 wounded since the start of the ground incursions earlier this month. Hezbollah said the number does not include the soldiers killed by cross-border actions against military sites and settlements on the border, as well as deeper inside Israel. It also said that 20 Merkava tanks, 4 military D9 bulldozers, and an armored vehicle had also been destroyed. Israel says its operations in the south aim to secure the return of tens of thousands of settlers who have fled northern Israeli settlements due to Hezbollah operations since the start of the war last year. And, based off of some of the stuff Hezbollah is reporting, like, there's no way they aren't getting, like, mass cal events. Here is something that just came out this morning. 2 anti-tank. All right. I got to turn it down because Hezbollah propaganda videos always have like Pirates of the Caribbean-esque music to them.
Yeah.
So right now, 2 anti-tank rounds with live feeds and basically a crosshair, if you're just listening to the audio, are flying into an Israeli IDF formation. They've broken down is that a border wall that was established by UN peacekeepers?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a kind of apartheid-esque wall, just less fortified. They've broken through a section, and there's like a motor pool of disorganized vehicles and men standing around not pulling security or anything. There's like 8 of them, and this anti-tank missile is flying straight towards the formation. Pirates of the Caribbean music continues. Flying towards the vehicle. There's like 4. Oh yeah, they've got a bulldozer thing, and right before it impacts, the feed cuts out. and there are eight guys all clustered around. If that impacts, which I'm sure it did, that's a pretty significant mass cal event. And then they followed up with a second rocket. And by the time the second rocket hits, hang on. By the time the second rocket hits, a lot of the people are still behind cover. It looks like they're moving casualties. And the second rocket missile goes straight into a Humvee that they're all sheltering behind. So that's not a fun time. So they're definitely being attrited.
Absolutely, and that's, you know, there's not a lot of information coming from either side from the south for lots of OPSEC reasons, but you know, they're making these claims, you know, that they've killed dozens and are wounding more, and normally I might be a bit skeptical of that, but because everyone always tends to inflate their numbers, you know, but but I'm seeing it corroborated. You know, I'm seeing videos of medevac helicopters, like several of them a day, and they're reporting on the numbers of patients and which hospital they're taking them to in northern Israel. So it does seem pretty significantly corroborated. On the flip side, you'll see you've seen the IDF like posing for lots of pictures and you know, doing their normal thing, you know, of looting, you know, civilian houses and you know, stealing lingerie and cash, and just posing for pictures as war tourists. And that's being done, you know, almost every single one of those videos or pictures where they're kind of casually, you know, pillaging or doing whatever is within an area, you know, within a kilometer or several hundred meters of the Lebanese border. And they're going into some of these villages and starting to destroy them when they've only secured a foothold. They haven't even secured and cleared the entire village. And they have difficulty with that because, you know, on the ground fight, they are significantly disadvantaged. Yeah, it just shows that what their real goal is with this ground invasion is to create space and create a buffer zone where either there is no civilian life on the Lebanese side, and they're doing that by demolishing villages, you know, destroying mosques. They destroyed an entire village yesterday or the day before with, you know, some very significant, 2,000-year-old religious shrines. Either to create space, you know, after this conflict where there will be no civilian activity around the border or civilian life, or where they will eventually occupy and settle these areas and try to expand their territory.
Yeah, and so it seems like the latter is going to happen because Israel has demanded of the U.S. for a Lebanon ceasefire to happen to include continued ground ops and airspace access. So
Yes.
Lebanon's parliament speaker has rejected the U.S.-Israeli discussions on, quote, amending the UN Resolution 1701, originally drafted at the end of the 2006 war. So Israel provided the U.S., in case you guys aren't tracking this story, with a document last week. So Israel gave the United States a document. Our colony gave us the document detailing its conditions for a diplomatic solution to end its war on Lebanon. 4 U.S., Israeli, and officials have told Axios News. So Netanyahu's office gave the paper to the White House ahead of President Biden's envoy Amos Hochstein visit to Beirut on Monday. Hochstein is a former IDF soldier to discuss a diplomatic solution to the conflict. This is what they were telling Axios News on the 21st. According to the document, Israel is demanding that its forces be permitted to carry out active enforcement inside Lebanese territory. This is post-ceasefire.
Yes.
This aims to ensure that the Lebanese resistance does not, quote, rearm and rebuild close to the border, one of the officials said. Israel also demands its Air Force have freedom of operation in Lebanese airspace, I guess to continue bombing people after a ceasefire. Yeah, look, I'm gonna save y'all a lot of time listening. Hezbollah turned that down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, obviously this is just a block check thing to say that they tried, right? I mean, which is what they've done with negotiations in Gaza since for a year now. It's not a serious attempt to and a good faith attempt to try to bring this conflict to a close.
Well,
So
they did
they
the
just
same.
they
They
set
did.
some ridiculous terms that you can't that no one would ever possibly agree to, and then they say, "Oh, look, we tried. You know, why wouldn't you agree with our terms? We tried for peace."
Yeah,
It's
these terrorists don't want peace. They hate our freedom,
yeah,
and they want to destroy, our state. But they did the same thing with Hamas. It's like they only have one playbook. They said, we will agree to a ceasefire if we can continue the war, and that's when Yahya Sinwar, before he was killed in action, just stopped talking. Just went black on comms after
yeah,
that. Because like, why would you? Because every time you're involved in direct negotiations, you're exposing yourself. So why that's why he went dark on comms, and because it's literally a non-starter.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's a farce. It's something that can be used to create a headline to keep people, who already agree with what Israel is doing, feeling good about themselves. It's not serious. But if we can go back to the like destruction in the south for a second,
Yeah, yeah, please.
I wanted to touch on, in addition to all these villages being destroyed in the south, while they still don't hold any significant territory and have not made any significant gains beyond a few kilometers. I mentioned that they deliberately demolishing mosques and other parts of the civilian infrastructure that if you were building an Israeli settlement there in 6 months, you wouldn't want to keep around. Um, but the destruction goes far beyond that, because of course you still have the bombing and really intense artillery campaign that's going all throughout the south. That's now even affecting UN peacekeepers and the Lebanese security forces also. In the past week, I think they've killed in at least two separate strikes 6 Lebanese army forces, like direct strikes. You've seen that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not just the villages and the border areas in the south. They're walking this destruction north as much as they can. In the past couple of weeks, the city of Nabatea, they've absolutely devastated a very significant and historic city that had a lot of residents in it. They've been really bombing the hell out of it. And just today in Tyre, which is a major city, it's one of the larger cities in Lebanon.
It's another ancient historical
Yeah,
site as
yeah, yeah,
well.
oh yeah, absolutely, like a huge,
Yeah.
massive Roman ruins. Uh, I'd like to tend to worry more about the people than the ruins, but that's significant that there's a lot of history being destroyed here. But today in Tyre, they issued a blanket evacuation order for a large part of the city, and I don't know if you've seen the images from it, but it is I think the first time in this conflict that I can see something that would be a legitimate use of the word carpet bombing. It was a massive series of strikes that looked like the extent of range several kilometers inside the center of the city. Absolutely insane. And that's just continuing. They're slowly doing that by piecemeal every night in Beirut and in other areas also. I mean, some of the strikes yesterday broke windows at the airport. And I don't know if you saw the photos of the planes taking off with the strike happening, just a few hundred meters away at the exact same time.
I mean, it's kind of unmitigated madness. And of course, we do want to care more about the people than the sites, but they're intentionally destroying cultural and heritage and archaeological sites. And I just wanted to point out that we condemn the Taliban and the Islamic State endlessly for doing the exact same thing. It's actually considered an act of terrorism. So,
Yeah. And some of their strikes in the Bekaa have caused some small damage to the Baalbek ruins, which are it's the largest Roman temple ever built on Earth is in Lebanon. And that's in an area that's being bombed every day, and some of the strikes are within within sight and very very close to these areas.
Yeah, I don't think Western supremacists would ever, or Western exceptionalists will ever care about mosques, but maybe they should care about the Roman ruins if they can't handle anything else.
White dudes love the Roman Empire, so you would think they would be up in arms about this.
Yeah. Well, they just don't know, because again, the mainstream media is never going to report this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean they're not reporting the deaths or the escalation or the move to a targeting openly, directly targeting civilian personnel, infrastructure, relief workers, civil service. What can you say when this is happening? It's being documented. It's there. It's out there on the internet, which everyone has access to, but it's not reaching people.
Well, I'll tell you what is reaching people. Last section, all the IDFs being sad boys. Okay, there was this egregious New York Times article that came out yesterday. It's CNN World. The headline is, quote, "He got out of Gaza, but Gaza did not get out of him," unquote. Israeli soldiers returning from war struggle with trauma and suicide. And I made a post about this last night on X, that, as a veteran, I generally am a proponent of, mental health and suicide prevention. But like when it comes to these guys who talked about bulldozing people, I don't really give a fuck. I don't.
Yeah.
You know who can't get out of Gaza? 1 million children. So good job, CNN. Yeah. So it was a big enough story that CNN wanted to do this sympathy piece. And a 40-year-old father of 4, they name him, unlike the Palestinian dead, he was an Israeli military reservist, and he returned a different person, traumatized by what he had witnessed in the war against Hamas. His family told CNN. 6 months after he was first sent to fight, he was struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Before he was due to redeploy. Instead of redeploying, he took his own life. And yeah, he got out of Gaza, but Gaza did not get out of him, his mother said, and he died after it because of the post-trauma. So the Israeli military has said it is providing care for thousands of soldiers who are suffering from PTSD or mental illness caused by trauma during the war. It's unclear how many have taken their own lives, as the Israeli Defense Forces have not provided an official figure. This was a direct quote from the CNN article. So, yeah, they've closed off Gaza to foreign journalists unless under IDF escorts. The mental health toll, we knew this was going to happen. This is why, the SS brigades during the Second World War had to stop doing mass graves, because here's a great quote about it. So, where was it? Sorry, I'm scanning through the article. Oh, yes. So this guy, Zakin, who they interviewed for the article, says he can no longer eat meat as it reminds him of the gruesome scenes he witnessed from his bulldozer in Gaza after running people over, and struggles to sleep at night. The sound of explosions ringing in his head. Yeah, because Israeli explosions dropping munitions everywhere. So he says, quote, "When you see a lot of meat outside and blood, both ours and theirs," he's applying Hamas, but obviously not, "then it really affects you when you eat," he told CNN, referring to bodies as, quote, "meat." He maintains that the vast majority of those he encountered were, quote unquote, terrorists. The civilians we saw, we stopped and brought them water to drink. No, you didn't. And we let them eat from our food. No, you didn't. Adding that even in such situations, Hamas fighters would shoot at them. So then he says, so there is no such thing as citizens. He said, this is terrorism. So, yeah, they talk about like squishing the meat and the blood out of people from their bulldozers, and now they can't eat anymore. Yeah, dude. It turns out genocide's bad for one's mental health. Like this
Yeah.
this is
So
literally why the Nazis had to industrialize it.
it's almost like invading someone's sovereign territory and committing war crimes against civilians and children every day for a year is going to have consequences. It's insane. Like this article, like, just is, when I read it, it was like that, especially that quote about people being having PTSD from being forced to bulldoze people or to drive over them and flatten them and pave the streets with them. It's an insane sentence to write down. I can't imagine being the reporter and writing that and thinking, yeah, that makes sense.
It's insane. Well,
How?
first of all, you and I have both done mechanized infantry operations, I'm sure.
Yes.
Why would you do that? Isn't there like a tenement of counterinsurgency where you don't want to be seen by the local population to be monsters?
No, let's forget the logic of this, because like if we look for the logic, we won't find it. In my opinion, it's just a case of someone, a young person, or maybe not so young, being handed a gun and being given carte blanche in an area that the people you're killing you've been told your whole life that they are not human, and you believe that they are not human, and so you go in and under the direct orders or the complacency of your superiors, from the ground level all the way up to the highest levels, you go in there and you commit horrible acts in the name of stopping terrorism, and you're doing it. You're hurting and killing civilians, and the way and manner in which you're doing that is egregious, and something on the level of that a normal the average person can never imagine. But these people in their environment where they're told that that's okay and that's encouraged, they do it. And then they get out of it, and then they sit and they have some time, and they think and they realize, wow, maybe what I was doing was actually wrong. Maybe running over dozens of people and paving the streets with their live and dead bodies is not such a good thing, even though they told me. So it's and again, like, this is like from the first time we talked to the point that I've always tried to make is that, like, this is happening, and it is being endorsed and institutionalized at every single level from within the IDF, from the ground to the top, and now the consequences are PTSD and sad feelings after they've been committing war crimes.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to handle it if in 5 years they make like a Hollywood movies about how sad the IDF are because they went into Gaza, killed a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah,
should.
I'll see you at the protest for that movie.
Oh no, I think people should just go into the movie theater and start pulling fire alarms during showtime.
Yeah. If I see a social media thing where people start doing push-ups for IDF suicide awareness, I'm gonna lose it.
Oh, I forgot how that was.
Yeah,
so
you remember
good.
this one, right? This is yeah, remember this. And we'll have to remind people, because this was during the height of veteran suicide during the GWAT, when this was becoming a big thing in the zeitgeist. That was the thing that went around. It's like people doing 22 push-ups a day because 22 veterans, apparently, end their lives every day.
Okay, well,
Remember this, right? It's
what people don't understand about this suicide rate amongst the IDF, like it's gonna not be, it's gonna get bad. Like once they come back home for like 6 months, a year, can't eat, can't hold down a job, start drinking a lot, can't be in a relationship, then like after that has some time to marinate, that's when it's really going to skyrocket, just like it did in the United States. But it might even be worse. I don't know. I'm going to talk to a psychologist about this in a future episode. But after yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh no, so like after a year of committing genocide in Gaza, this is being widely reported. There was a Ha Makom magazine article published in 20 October that also said that soldiers are quietly refusing orders to return not just to the Gaza Strip, but to southern Lebanon to fight, saying they are depressed, worn out, psychologically damaged, and unmotivated. So this ultra-Orthodox oriented magazine interviewed multiple soldiers and parents. When a platoon of 30 soldiers of the Nahal Brigade, which is one of the more prestigious units, was recently ordered to enter Gaza for the latest of several tours. Only 6 reported for duty. And they returned to this, and they said the mother of one of these soldiers said they returned to the same buildings that they cleared, each time trapping them anew. They had been to Al Zaytun neighborhood 3 times already. They understand that it is futile and pointless, having to re-clear buildings that they've already cleared before, but now they've got HPIDs and IEDs in them.
Yep, that's it. And this is, you're hitting on what you can say is a classic problem for a colonizer or an imperial army, right? Because why are they having these this high rate of people refusing service or questioning or protesting or whatever, or even the PTSD? It's not just from the war crimes. It's from the fact that when you're in there and you're faced with this violence every day, and then you leave that environment. About the time you're asked to come back to it, you start to ask yourself, what am I really fighting for? I think everyone has this question in their minds at some point or another, everyone who fights. And when your reasons are I don't want to say justified, but when they're true to yourself and your identity and to your people, then that's usually an easy decision to make. But when you're fighting an imperial war and you're fighting a endless conflict and you're just a cog for a machine of colonization, you're going to question it, and you're probably going to be more likely to refuse it.
Yeah, I think my third deployment, our deployments were only like 4 to 6 months, so it's shorter than yours. I think my third deployment was where I was like, okay, what the fuck are we actually doing here?
Yeah,
this is stupid.
Yeah, it took me maybe 4 months in Afghanistan to start to have that question seriously on my mind every day. What are we? What would you say you're doing here?
Yeah, what would you say you do here? What would you
say you do here? Yeah, that was in my mind every day.
Yeah, so there's these guys are I would like to say, obviously a little bit more brainwashed than we were growing up in a really militarized culture in America, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't like that. They're already questioning it, and I just think this is going to continue, and it's just going to be more and more self-destructive for their military as a whole, for their societal fabric, and it's only going to get worse. And I think people have made the observation that having Netanyahu in power is going to be horrible, but it's going to end the project sooner than anything, because this is just insane.
Yeah, it's we've reached levels of absurdity that I thought were not possible.
Yeah,
at this point.
And it's no breaks. You'd think if the United States and the politicians, who are not all idiots, especially the operatives in the State Department, actually cared about Israel, they would make it stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that what the United States is doing and what they're allowing and supporting with money, weapons, and rhetoric, and lack of accountability is damaging U.S. relations and U.S. foreign policy, not just in the Middle East, but I think it's ending, the status of U.S. foreign relations in the Middle East, but around the world, it's really turning our government, our foreign policy into a joke, and we did not need any help doing that because we've done a pretty good job ourselves over the past couple decades.
Yeah, but now Israel's giving us its demands for a ceasefire. Ooh,
Yeah.
it's an embarrassing look for the Biden administration. So we'll keep monitoring the situation. We'll come back after they strike Iran. I mean, if they're smart, they won't. They'll just, again, up the propaganda, be like, they couldn't even hit us the first time. Look how backwards their paper tiger military is. And they'll just leave it at that. But I don't think they will. Nothing we've seen over the past year, speaks to restraint or good sense. So we'll come back when that happens, man. And in the meantime, we'll keep watching southern Lebanon and, of course, the ongoing and escalating catastrophe in Gaza. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Matthew Enderline coming to us from Beirut. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we will see you on the next one. There's going to be a live Q&A on our Patreon tomorrow, and then Friday Gallows Humor episode. So hope to see you there. We might actually do one more on voting. Maybe it's a touchy subject, but we might get into it. All right, y'all. See you on the next one. Cheers and good luck.